Hi everybody, my name's Natta Jain. Welcome to my magical YouTube channel. I'm a professional astrologer and I'm also a tarot reader, and I've been teaching occult philosophy and magic for the last 8 years. And this is my channel where I'm talking about all the wonderful and fascinating and most unusual things in the magical world. So thank you for joining me, and let's get on with today's talk. So let's start off with mangoes. Now mangoes, they're ruled by 2 planets actually. They're ruled by both Venus and also the Sun. And there is many different uses for mangoes in relation to magic, and they have a lot of different relationships in regard to symbology as well. So mangoes are related to love in particular. That's a very strong aspect of them, and fertility. They're also related to friendship and hospitality, a little bit like pineapples are. And they're also connected to prosperity and wealth and good health, lust as well, and purification, and a little bit more unusually, they're also related to death rites as well. So very, very wide, encompassing many different things that they rule over. So in India, they were cultivated as one of the oldest fruits. And so they've been growing in India for about 5,000 years now. In the Vedas, which is the Indian spiritual scriptures, they're actually referred to as the fruit of the gods. So they're seen as this incredibly sacred fruit, particularly by Buddhists. So Buddha was said to have often spent time meditating in the mango groves. And in Indian mythology, the daughter of the sun god, Surya, was actually born from a mango. So when this mango fell from the tree, it was supposed to have fallen from earth, and then it basically turned into his beautiful princess goddess daughter. In Hinduism, it's also seen as a symbol of Prajapati, which is the lord of all creation. And the myth goes that when the gods and the demons, when they shook the sea and they were trying to raise this nectar up from the sea, and out from this, a mango tree was born. And this was said to be the first mango tree. So mangoes are used in so many different ways. So in particular, they were used in a lot of rituals in India to help women who were struggling to conceive. And that's the mango branches and twigs in particular. They were burnt. And initially, back in the day, when mango trees were grown, they were actually seen as this very royal fruit. So they were only grown in royal gardens throughout India. And they were seen as this great symbol of prosperity and fertility and wealth. And up to these stately sort of palaces, that the roads going up to them, they'd be lined with these mango trees. So they're also connected to Shiva, who is the Indian Trinity god, a little bit like when we talk about the idea of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, or the Maiden Mother Crone. It's this Trinity aspect. And also his wife Parvati, who was the goddess of love and fertility. And it was said that when they married under a mango tree, and that the leaves were used very often. The leaves are used to decorate weddings, and also when you are having a new home, you would bring them into the new home for blessings and good fortune. Traditionally, the mango tree should be planted in the east of the garden to bring good fortune. And it's seen, as I was saying, it's a little bit like a pineapple. In South America, the pineapples were very popular in regard to friendship and hospitality, and a little bit like that with the mango as well. And so it was seen as a great offering of friendship to give, particularly whenever there was a full moon. So it was actually Alexander the Great who introduced mangoes to Greece, and eventually they spread into Portugal. And the Portuguese had an incredibly strong relationship with mangoes. They were very fond of them. And that's actually where we get the name mango from, because it's actually, that's the Portuguese name for them. The mangoes in magic, as I said, they have a lot of very different uses. So predominantly they are used in lust or love magic, and they're also used in banishing rituals. The juice can be used as a love potion, and also the dried up mango, it can be put in some almond oil and some jasmine essential oil, and then it can be put on the body to increase love basically into our lives, to encourage it to come in, to increase lust, this sort of a thing. If you were going to increase lust, I would probably add a little bit of Damiana as well to that mix, steep some in there, or maybe some black peppercorns is another good one as well. Because they're ruled by Mars, and Mars is that aspect of passion. So when they were used in banishing rituals, and lots of fruits and vegetables are used in banishing rituals, it's very common actually, but when mangoes are used in banishing rituals, what you do is you cut the mango, you make an incision at the top of it, and then you just ever so slightly pull the skin back from the actual fruit. And then what you do is you get a little knife and you inscribe the name of the thing or the person or whatever that you want to banish out of your life. And then what you would do is, once you've inscribed their name onto this little piece of mango skin on the flap, you would then rip it off quite strongly, and then you would roll up that mango and you would either bury it or you would put it in the trash. But if you're going to put it in the trash, just take it out straight away, basically. Obviously, whenever doing banishing or whenever doing love, or actually just general full stop, it's never good to do something that is going to cause harm to anybody. Don't do that. It's not good. So even if you are doing a banishing and you're using that mango and you're writing, you know, maybe somebody's name on who you haven't been able to get out of your mind, but it's a toxic relationship, always still wish them well though when you're banishing. So very popular fruits, also in Africa as well. So they became very popular over there, and they were seen as a traditional love offering, and they were connected to the goddess Yemaya, who is the African Yoruba goddess of the sea, basically, of the sea, love, and also fertility. And so they were often given to her when people were doing love rituals as well. Going back to India for a second, it's actually very good luck, apparently, to eat a mango on New Year's Day. I love mango, so I'm more than happy to do that on New Year's Day. And they're also seen as an energy enhancer. So in some ways, they are a little bit like rosemary. So I tend to always add rosemary to whatever spells or magic I'm doing to give it a little bit more oomph. And rosemary is a bit of a quickening agent as well. So they what they do is they add to the potency of whatever magic you're making. So for example, if you were even making a spell or a sachet that didn't require mango normally, if you really wanted to give it an extra sort of push or extra gusto behind it, then add some dried mango in, basically. If you're making a sachet or if you are making an ointment, add some dried mango. Whatever you're doing, it's good to add that mango in, because as I said, it has this added potency to it, and it brings that enhanced energy. It's quite interesting, actually. I read somewhere recently that apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently if you eat a mango an hour before you smoke weed, apparently it's supposed to really enhance the experience even further. So yeah, I don't know about that one, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's just bringing up that principle again of that it's an enhancer, and that's something that's used in magic. So I found that quite sort of an interesting connection there. It's related to the solar plexus energy, and so this is very much in connection with the idea of our stomach region and our place of power within ourselves, our center of power, and our courage and our confidence and our strength. It's a very solar area of our body, which is very much that sun that it's related to. And whenever we see the sun and Venus together, because remember it's ruled by both the sun and Venus, they're both incredibly positive planets, and they're both incredibly attracting planets as well, and illuminating too. So very, very powerful energy from mangoes. Always good to have that little bit of dried mango so you can add it to all of your special spells and potions, basically. Yes. So that is mangoes. So on to rhubarb. Now rhubarb's ruled by Venus, and as I think I've mentioned before, you know, Venus is very much about love. It's about romance, fertility. It's also about what we're able to attract towards ourselves. With rhubarbs, though, it's also about purifying, cleansing, and manifestation as well, and protection. So I think probably the idea of cleansing comes from the fact that initially rhubarbs, they weren't actually eaten for an incredibly long time, for many, 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 many hundreds or thousands of years. Rhubarbs initially, they were believed to have come from ancient China in about 2700 BC approximately. And they were just used as medicine for a really, really long time. Nobody really ate them. And so initially they were used as laxatives predominantly, which is probably where the idea of purification comes from, and they were used in detoxing sessions, basically. In ancient Persia, in the mythology of one of the creation myths from there, the father god and the mother goddess, they were actually believed to have been birthed and born, both of them, from the rhubarb plant. I quite like that story. I think it's rather lovely. In Russia, they were also very popular. A lot of Russian witches used to use rhubarb in their manifestation spells. Russia has an incredibly rich history of witches and occult practices. So I'm always quite fascinated with what people were doing over in Russia in the magical world. But yes, they were very, very popular there. It wasn't really until we got to about the 17th century in Europe that people actually started eating rhubarb. So relatively, it's not really that long ago, considering they've been around for such a long time. And they became really popular, particularly in England. There's an old saying in England, and it says, do you think the rain will hurt the rhubarb? And people say that in England when they are not comfortable with the conversation and they'd like to try and change the conversation to something else, but they don't want to be rude. So yeah, so do you think the rain will hurt the rhubarb is a way of changing that conversation politely, and everyone knows what you mean, basically. Often the dried roots is worn as a protection amulet, and it can be placed in a mojo bag as protection. The root was very, very common in Europe during the Black Death. Everybody pretty much had a little piece of rhubarb root pinned onto them in some way or another, because it was believed to help protect against the plague. It was also, rhubarb was added to desserts to encourage and maintain fertility in partnership. And that's one of the big things about rhubarb, is that rhubarb is normally used in magic when there is some really major crisis within a relationship, and that marriage or that relationship is on the verge of breaking up, and you know, a divorce is on the cards, basically, of some description or another, and rhubarb is often used to help heal that relationship and try and get it back on track. I would say, in regard to any magic, don't do anything that is manipulating somebody else's will. That's not good stuff to do. But I'm just kind of saying that for a point of interest, more so. Rhubarb was also stewed with sugar, and it's given to children as a protection food charm. So there's lots of protection food charms, actually, such as I think I've mentioned before in one of my other talks, is a banana in relation to protection whilst you're travelling. And also rhubarb and strawberry pies were made as an aid of fertility. So that's another example of a food charm, or using food in magic. A lot of people used to use food in magic because it's just an incredibly easy way to do it. And so when you had rhubarb and strawberry pie, this fertility pie basically, the rhubarb was seen as the phallus, and the strawberries are seen as the ovaries. And so it's to encourage a couple to have children, basically. So rhubarb is connected to the sacral chakra, and so it's kind of our more sort of sexual organs, basically, and it's that part of us which is that deeper primal aspect of ourselves. So it's very, very powerful, rhubarb. What I will say, just as a quick safety note for people, is never, ever, ever do anything with rhubarb leaves, though, because they're incredibly poisonous. My grandma told me that when she was younger, her next door neighbour, she cooked these rhubarb for her family, but she also cooked it with the leaves as well, and he got incredibly ill. And actually, I think if I remember rightly, I think the neighbour died. So so absolutely avoid those rhubarb leaves; they're quite dangerous. But maybe make a lovely rhubarb and strawberry pie. Yes. So that is rhubarb. Let's discuss horseshoes now. So horseshoes, now they've always been classed as very lucky. When we think about horseshoes or four-leaf clovers, they tend to be the symbols that automatically come to our mind when we think about good luck. Horses, in actual fact, themselves have always been seen as incredibly highly sacred and magical animals, which is ultimately where the luck comes from with the horseshoe. Horses, they symbolize many different things, fertility being one, also magic, clairvoyance, and speed, obviously, because they go quite fast, don't they? Travel as well for that reason. Also omens as well. Horses are always seen as being connected to omens, and they're related to wisdom and healing. So if we think about the ancient Greek Chiron, the centaur, he was very well known for his healing abilities. And horses were always seen as having a very, very close relationship to the deities and also to witches as well. And they symbolize friendship and strength and also sexuality. So it's quite a few different things that horses come under symbolism-wise, basically. So across India and the Middle East and Europe, horses were seen as really being connected to fertility and life. So if we think about the horseshoe symbol, it's very much like the womb. And it's always been seen as this symbol of the divine feminine, ultimately. So in Celtic times, it was actually believed that the souls of the dead were taken to the underworld on horseback. And the ancient Celts, as much as they saw the horse and the horseshoe as life-giving, they also saw it as the entire passage of time and the cycles of life from birth, death, and fertility, and round and round and round we go. And so many of the Druid temples were actually constructed in a horseshoe shape as well, their opening to them. Because the Celts, one of their main goddesses is they worshipped a goddess called Epona. And Epona was the horse goddess, and she was classed as a Trinity goddess. And so the Trinity means the maiden, mother, and the crone. So all the aspects of life, which is why we see the horseshoe also symbolized as things like birth, fertility, and death. But also it's seen as the wisdom that grows throughout age as we grow older, basically. So in ancient Europe, particularly in Central and Western Europe, there was a very common and very popular type of divination called hippomancy, which is a slightly unusual name. It does make you think of hippos as opposed to horses, but still. Hippomancy, and this is divination with horses. And so there's a number of different ways in which they would sort of look at the horse to determine what the symbols and omens were. But they would have a look at the behaviour of the horse and the colour of it, the hoof markings that it would make. And when it's moving around and creating dust or moving the dust or the dirt in different patterns, people would also read this for oracular signs, a bit like tea leaf reading, really. So hippomancy was really, really, really popular. And this belief in the horse as an incredibly sacred and very beneficial animal that had a very close relationship with the gods, and the fact that, you know, horses were seen as this sort of aspect of fertility in life. This is a lot of where the lucky horseshoe initially comes from. In England in the 1500s, if a horse died, they'd actually hang it up. They'd cut off the hooves and they'd hang those hooves up over the doorway. And it's a very old folk custom to protect the house, basically. And so horseshoes, they were seen as either protection amulets or good luck charms, kind of either or really in relation to that. They were made out of iron. So all horseshoes are made out of iron. And iron, in relation to magic and occult philosophy, iron is ruled by the planet Mars. And so Mars is a very sort of martial warrior fighting energy. And this is another reason why horseshoes, being made of iron, were great as an aspect of protection in the house. And in actual fact, any item that you had that was made of iron was seen as incredibly protective as well. There's a really nice old Irish folktale about a blacksmith who managed to fend off the devil by nailing a horseshoe to the devil's hoof. And the devil was in so much pain that he ripped off the horseshoe and swore to avoid them again at all costs. I quite like that story. So it's a really nice, very lovely old folk tale. And it also goes with the reasoning about why people felt that horseshoes were so protective against evil forces. So now if you only had one horseshoe, you would have to really make a decision about whether you wanted your horseshoe facing upwards or downwards. You couldn't have both. Because once you put a horseshoe in place, it was incredibly bad luck to move it, and you would definitely never try and turn it up and around the other way either. So if you had your horseshoe and it was facing upwards, then this was for good luck and love and fertility and prosperity and abundance and healing and all these sorts of things. If you had your horseshoe and it was downwards, then this is where it's being used as protection to ward off negative energies. So many people, what they do is they'd actually have more than one horseshoe. In actual fact, in Monmouth Street, which is a very famous street in London, in the 1800s, there was this house that was very famous because over the front door they had 17 horseshoes, which is a hell of a lot. And the person that lived there was very well known locally for obviously being incredibly superstitious. So normally you'd have one or two, and ideally the best horseshoe that you could possibly have is one that you actually find rather than buy. It's okay to buy them, but if you could find one, then that was incredibly auspicious and very special, particularly if it still had its nails in. What you would do is if you find a horseshoe, you'd spit on the horseshoe and then you would throw that horseshoe over your left shoulder and pick it up again. And then take it home and nail it to either above your doorway, or you could nail it above the chimney, because people used to do that as well for protection. In any house opening, so people would nail them above windows as well. Or your bed as well. Often people would nail horseshoes on top of their bed or on the bedpost to protect from bad dreams, basically, too. Now, depending how many nails were still left in that horseshoe would depend on the magnitude of the luck as well. So if you manage to find a horseshoe and it has all the 7 nails still intact in it, then that is obviously the greatest luck that you can have. Saying that though, even if it has 1 nail in it, it's still classed as incredibly lucky. Also what people would do is if you found a horseshoe, if you were single as well, and if you found a horseshoe, you would count the holes that don't have nails in, and those holes would believed to determine how many years you'd have to wait until you get married. So horseshoes, they've got 7 holes in actual fact, and those 7 holes are related to 7, is a very spiritual number, and those 7 holes were seen as being related to the 7 colours of the rainbow, 7 days of the week, 7 traditional planets, all sorts of things. So very, very deeply sacred number. But normally when you were pinning up your horseshoe in your house, you'd actually pin it up with 3 nails, ideally. And those 3 nails, that was the best practice, basically. And those 3 nails were related to the maiden mother crone aspect, or the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, so the Trinity. So also if we think about the Greek letter, the last letter of the Greek alphabet, which is omega, omega is actually the symbol for the horseshoe, and Omega is this portal between life and death as well. And so it's got these very, very significant connotations to it. And the horseshoe, as I was saying, so you would never remove it. Once it's put there, and that is it, basically. And you would keep it there forever. As well as houses, ships, which you wouldn't normally think about horses on ships, but merchant ships would often have horseshoes nailed to the foremast of the vessel for safety whilst sailing. And Nelson was quite famous for having horseshoes that he would nail to the boat for good luck as well. So it's a very, very popular practice with a lot of sailors in olden times. So now if you found a broken horseshoe, normally, you know, I would tend to think automatically maybe that's bad luck, but it wasn't actually. So a broken horseshoe, if you found a broken horseshoe and it still managed to have nails in, it was seen as incredibly great luck. Very, very, very lucky item to have, because it shows that throughout all of life's challenges, you've still managed to get through them. So it was seen as very, very auspicious if you found one of these. The best horseshoes were always going to be the ones that had old nails in as well. So if you manage to come across a horseshoe, whether you find one or whether you buy one, then put it above your door or put it on your wall. It's good to have there as good luck. Maybe have two, one for protection and also one for bringing in, you know, all that wonderful love and fertility and abundance and prosperity. So that's what you do with horseshoes. And that's the end of today's talk today. So thank you for joining me. It's been a real pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the discussion today. Please do like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also please do join my Natta Jain Instagram page as well. If you're interested in having a reading, astrology or tarot reading, then I do video chat readings for between an hour and 2 hours. And I also teach private lessons as well via video chat. I teach tarot and astrology from beginners to advanced. I teach about magical symbolism and occult philosophy. I also teach Kabbalah as well. And I teach a 1 year and 1 day traditional training in witchcraft. So if you're interested in any of these things, obviously feel free to go onto my Instagram and just DM me at Natta Jain. I hope you enjoyed the video. So I'll be doing more of these. I've got a astrology video that's coming up next. And so I look forward to seeing you then. So have a lovely day. Bye.